kind of a back and forth discussion on how do we use data vault in education. And we're also recording this so we can share this out to other people as well. So I'm going to transition this over to Christopher, and he's going to take it from here.
All right. So at Infovia, we are working on bringing peace of mind through data. We offer data consultation, and we also offer a security product that is important because you don't want your data going places, and you'll hear more about that later. If you want to look at some of our clients here, these are the people we've worked through, and these are the educational groups we've worked with. So we do have some experience working in the educational field. Our clients are pretty happy with us, which has been nice. This is Huichi from NYU, who we had a chance to work with. That was an interesting project. And now, before I really launch into this, let me admit one more person here. Sorry. I wanted to reach out, and if any of you work in the data sphere or not, or in the educational environment or not, and if you could just quickly introduce yourself and let us know what your data challenge is, assuming you have one. And if you don't, I'm impressed.
Somebody step up or we'll start calling names.
Christopher, I'll go. This is Kathy Wright.
Kathy.
And I work for Pet IQ. We are a pet manufacturing industry as well as a pet services industry. And I would say our data challenges end up having to do with all things data, trying to manage the data management overall with MDM, as well as data governance, and of course the ever eternal data privacy challenges that every single business has.
Thanks, Kathy. And I see we have a new addition to the call there as well.
Yeah, Kathy, Skylar says hi.
All right. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to move along then, and actually.
So I'm Ed Comer from Student One, and I think the big data challenge in K-12 is the variance of data from district to district. And so implementations are different and tools are different, and trying to deal with the variance is a continuing pain.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, that's for sure. I'm actually going to switch up my sharing thing here as we get into this and go with. All right.
Anybody else want to pipe in with their challenge and a short introduction? Luke, John. Don't be shy.
So I'm with JLL, and so we were on a call earlier. Just wanted to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing. I'm a consultant for JLL, so I have some other projects and that involve education. I know the problems. I haven't gotten to them yet, but so I know a few of the problems and probably it's going to be similar to what Ed was saying, like different districts and integrating with different. Everybody has a different format with Google Classroom and all kinds of providers.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Luke. Kasturi, you just joined. Kasturi's from NYU. Kasturi, we're just doing introductions. I'm sorry to surprise you with that, but a quick introduction, and then what is your biggest data challenge or a data challenge that you're facing?
Okay, so I need to think about, there are so many challenges. So I'm from NYU, as Mike said, and I have been with NYU for more than 9 years. I think this is my 9+ years. And I started working actually on Data Vault. Introduction was given by Mike, of course. And I did Robert, and then Mike, and then Christopher. Of course, I cannot, yes.
Right.
Christopher and Mike, they helped us actually, our team, to get split up to, to do this, the whole conversion from what we did without Wordscape. And even I think Data Vault was actually introduced by Robert, but Mike, you came with Wordscape, right? You
That's
introduced
right.
us with the Wordscape.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, we were brought in at NYU to help what would you call it? Accelerate your automation.
Accelerate this, yes, whole process. And Christopher was a huge contributor. Without him, it would have been absolutely impossible. So we are up and running right now with Wordscape, and we are using Data Vault to create this repository
Okay.
for
Well, thanks.
institutional
Welcome.
data. Yeah.
Thanks for joining today.
Great to hear from you again. All right. Okay. So, the senior architect at Infovia, I like data, everything data. I like talking about data, I like managing data, and I like educational data. Educational data is interesting. It's kind of a different environment than your standard business. You have a lot of differences, and thankfully, Data Vault helps meet a lot of those challenges. So I've outlined a few of them, the differences that I feel are really up there. One of them is you have invested stakeholders, and they provide feedback all the time. You have not just your staff, not just the students, but you have the student parents, and you have the government, and you have the public even sometimes. This varies depending on if you're K-12 or if you're in a college setting, but you have a lot more stakeholders than your average business, it seems to. The other thing that's really interesting about educational data is you have a lot of data to choose from. Each department and sometimes each section within a department has to solve the problems they have, which inevitably are data problems. And so there are a lot of resources they use and a lot of individual platforms. And these platforms often have user-generated content. So there's teachers, there's staff members and students in there producing things and recording things. And it's often your job to get that information, which brings us to the next part. There are a lot of very interesting things you can find out from educational data, even the demographics alone of your staff and students. But usually the impetus to get the data is not that really nice reporting you can do, but it's the drive for knowing what your data is, for having a consolidated list of students involved in this specific thing, because you need that data so you can feed this new initiative or this new program or this new online learning platform. So reverse ETL has kind of come into the common data vernacular lately, and that's the idea that you're collecting your data from your organization and your intention is to pump it back out into some other program. And when I heard that, I thought that was kind of funny, because every time I work with an educational environment, an educational data ecosystem, that is their primary driver, right? They would love to do reporting, but they need to get the data in so they can get the data back out so they can get the data back in. It's just this endless, very requirements driven process. And again, you get the stakeholders involved there. And the last thing I really like about educational data is you do make a difference. You're impacting people, their youth, you're impacting your staff members, and everybody really cares about it. So it's really impassioned. So
Hey,
I want to talk.
do any of those invested stakeholders have opinions?
Occasionally, yes.
Okay.
Particularly the parents in K-12, I gotta say. There have been a lot of interesting stories there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I won't go too much into the stories there. I'm going to cover the basics of Data Vault just so we can explain how we address some of these unique concerns. Then I'm going to talk about how Data Vault solves these problems. And then I'm going to give us a view of a Data Vault model actually from one of our clients in education. It's just a little snapshot, but I think you'll find it pretty interesting. So first of all, Data Vault. At its core, it's a really simple concept. It's a hub and spoke pattern, we call it. And the idea is your hub is your subject. It's whatever is important to you. So students, staff, maybe a course. It's this core idea. And then your satellites spoke out, and that's a descriptive element. So if your hub is a term, your satellite is descriptive information about that term. And then your final component is a link, which lets you match up these subjects. So here we see that we have a hub for term, so that's our subject, and we have another hub over here for section, another subject, and in between we have a link that shows a relationship between a term and a section. All right, so invested stakeholders. The best way to deal with invested stakeholders is to give them data quickly and to give them data accurately. Data Vault is really helpful for this because it is so precise that you can actually recreate your original source system data from those objects you've created. So the hubs, satellites, and links, all of that can be rehydrated, if you want to think about it like that, into what the original source system was showing. And what that means is you can have complete confidence with sufficient testing that your data matches exactly what was in the source system, which means you know your data warehouse is perfect or as perfect as it can be. And that leaves room to not worry so much about, did this happen right? Where did this come from? But you can have that better discussion of, does this business rule fit this need? It also lets you ingest very quickly with that hub and spoke model. Since you are just putting satellites around any given subject, you can choose something. You can say, you know what, I want to start with students, and you can pull in information from many different sources about those students and just put them in satellites around the student hub. And you have that data available, and you can choose what descriptive elements you need and pipe them all into whatever is necessary. So accuracy, timeliness makes stakeholders happy. Kind of related to this, so I just mentioned that you can choose a subject and work with it and build that subject. So there's more depth to that. Data Vault is a very modular approach. You don't need to take your entire project in one shot. You can choose a core idea, students again, or perhaps a section or a course, and go around from all your different data sources and ingest that into your model and build up those descriptive elements or those links. So you don't need to make sure you've encompassed an entire source system. You can go cherry picking what is important to you and what is important to your organization and pull that back right away. And now this is important, particularly in education, because like we were saying, everyone has their own solution, right? Every department has something going on. And a lot of times that's specialized programs. A lot of times that's different business practices. So even though this data is very siloed, it's important. And with the Data Vault model, it doesn't mind that it's siloed. It pulls it into a shared area where all this data can be looked at the same level. I kind of think of it as an internet for your data. Once you pull it in the Data Vault, all the data can talk together no matter where it came from. Reverse ELT. So this is, like I said, one of the drivers for educational data. We see all the time, we have a list of students from this program and a list of students from this program, and we know everybody from this sports program is not going to be available on a given day. So we need a way to consolidate all this. So again, it's kind of that siloed data. But with Data Vault, since we're centering around these subjects, we have an easy way to see from as many different source systems as we want all these different types of data and work it all together and feed it into whatever system we need to, and then pull it back for further use. This saves people a lot of time. Almost inevitably in the K-12 environment, you'll find some poor soul who's been spending an hour a day for the past 10 years arranging some report with 6 different sources. And you can come in and just remove that need and have it displayed for them in a very convenient view or CSV or whatever they need, which kind of leads to the next part, the satisfaction of making a difference. Everything in education is important. It's the future, right? These are young kids or college goers, and they are going to be the future, and you are affecting that. You're making their lives easier. You're making their lives more organized, all behind the scenes. And you're also helping the teachers and the people with this driving passion that's out there. So it's a good feeling. I enjoy it. Let's see. Now, Kasturi, I've always meant to ask you, you seem to have kind of an overview of the NYU data. Do you feel siloed with where you're at, or do you feel like you have a pretty good grasp on all the various data sources NYU uses?
Because it's not really because of a data vault, because I was actually involved in building the data warehouse before the data vault came into the picture. So I had a good understanding of all the data sources. So I'm recreating this whole thing in data vault. So yeah, pretty much because of that knowledge, I would say, yeah, I have pretty comprehensive knowledge of, but still there are many areas that I didn't touch. So yes. So one of the, it's not a question time yet, right? Is it?
No, please go ahead.
Oh,
Anytime.
okay.
Please feel free.
One
Anyone
thing that I'm having difficulty in communicating to others, that we are recreating the source. So every single table is kind of broken into three parts: hub, satellite, and link. And sometimes hub is common, but satellite and link. And then when I'm recreating that source, I'm joining those three components and creating a view. And a lot of times I'm getting this question, why are we doing it? Why can't we just bring in the landing table? Is it because of we are having all the history accumulated in a data vault? That is my explanation. That's the only thing I could think of, that we are building history. But if the source already has history, then what am I gaining by doing that extra step? That was my difficulty in when I was trying to explain.
So you're right, and I hadn't even brought up the temporal aspect, but you're right. Data Vault does store things indefinitely until you get rid of them. And what I like to do, like Kathy at PetIQ, her team had some similar questions. They said, well, why? I know my source database really well. Why are we going through this process? And the answer goes back to the idea of siloed data, and as well as some community data kind of ideas here. So while someone might know an individual database very well and understand that the table PRQLT1 contains customer data, that is not a very social way to present the data. And it's not necessarily going to be at the same grain as any other data that is relevant to that idea. So when you have a topic that's really important to your organization, whether it be students or courses or anything along those lines, you're going to have more than one set of data relevant to that subject. And what happens with Data Vault, and particularly when you're bringing it into InfoMarts, is you're taking all of this data about students and you're saying, I don't care what your source system says about these students. I don't care what format it's in. I'm going to pull that data in, and we're going to have a unique list of every student, and we're going to have it arranged in such a way that source system A, B, C, and D all know that they're talking about the same student, assuming that student exists across all those source systems. So what we've done then is we have made it so that even if a student is only in 3 of the 4 systems or 1 of the 4 systems, we can perform a query against the data vault and return all relevant information about that student. Whereas if we relegated ourselves to just the load tables or just the source system, we don't have that interconnectedness, that internet of data available to us. So that's the presentation side. That's the reporting side. We can see all the data from all the sources in any way we want, which is a change up from your traditional dimensional modeling. Don't want to get too crunchy here technically, but that's where there's a golden record. Data Vault is all the data all the time. Any piece of data you want to see relating to a student and in relation to that data about a student, you can. That's one side of it. Now, for people on the back end, like you and I, Kasturi, the really nice thing is I don't need to know exactly how whatever database or whatever data source works, because when they engineered that and brought that into Data Vault, it is now in these business, or in our case, the educational environment terms. It's no longer called table AVI TL9. It is now a student hub that is fed, or a satellite called demographics that is fed. So it brings a social aspect to the back end as well. You don't need to know the ins and out of a source system in order to provide the data that they're looking for. So for me, what really sold me on Data Vault, especially when I first came into contact with it, is this interconnectedness of data. It doesn't matter what the source is, you can navigate a data vault. You can look around, even if you don't understand how it works or the guts of it. I'm going to go to this next slide here. It's immediately clear that you have hub, and every satellite attached to the hub is details about it from all your different sources. So it completely exposes details about whatever the subject is at the same grain.
Yeah, thank you.
I really, that's how I really feel about it. It's your internet for data. Until you get it in your data vault, until you have it playing nicely with the same protocols and the same syntax as the rest of your data, it's still siloed. It's still hard to access, both from a back end, I'm giving this to my reporting users, and for the reporting users, it's hard to get it.
So if the data has issues like data quality, so we do 100% all the time, right? 100%, what is it? 100%, 100, whatever it is. So we get all the data from source. We don't do any data quality check or anything, just hard rules. But then where do you do that check? Do you do it in business?
Absolutely, yes. So you pull all the data in and you accept the data as it is from the source system. And what that does with that rule is you make sure you're capturing everything. And because you're capturing all the data all the time and you have longitudinal data, then these business rules can come in and clean that up and make it more comprehensible. But the core, the bedrock of your warehouse is having perfectly captured that source data. And that means you can reliably move forward. And if a business rule changes, that's not a problem because your core data is still the same. So you never lose that authenticity and that accuracy of your source system data, no matter what happens with the business rules or what you need to do to make that data more understandable or ingestible by the business.
But when you really want to have a data quality framework where you need to check the data accuracy, because down the line, if you move forward, we are finding this also another issue that student information systems, they have identifier for the students, and there is NYU specific. Everybody, it's across the board, there will be one identifier, and you remember that. So these two identifiers, sometimes they have many to many relationship, which should not be the case. It should be one-to-one always.
Yes, should.
So what?
Should.
So that should. And what happens is sometimes student information system invalidates one and keeps one. So if we don't catch that when we're in the raw vault, then at the time we go to the business vault, it becomes really complex. Which one I should keep, which one I should reject, or a rejected records should go back to the source if we want to establish data quality framework. So what will be the best place to do that? Really, that's another problem I'm facing right now.
Well, it sounds like you're approaching it with how I would suggest. You're ingesting it from the raw vault and you're saying these are different. These are many to many where they should be one to one. And the follow-up question is why, right? So there are two paths. One is you're acknowledging it. And once you've identified it and you can refer to your source data to prove it, then you can start pushing back on the business and giving them information and letting them know where there might be some holes in their process. So that's helping the organization clean up its source system. It's helping remove the problem in the future. And the other side, the user-facing side, the reverse ETL side, right? You're working on it by having established that there is a problem, selecting one. You said rejecting, and I think that's fair. I think of it more as a smoothing process, same kind of thing. But you have these sometimes conflicting sources of data, and you need to know there is a problem in order to help fix it.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can use your warehouse to help identify these is a huge benefit. It's a huge benefit to, I won't go too far into it, but it's really important to the business. And this is the only place they get to see this, because nowhere else does your data talk to each other. So it feels like a problem because you need to figure out which of the 5 records is the right record and why are 3 students attached to this. But in reality, it's a huge advantage, and it's a huge need for your organization to understand where those gaps are and to be able to help fix them. So I think you have the right approach. Get it all into Raw Vault. Find some business rules for identifying these overlaps or gaps or replications, and then work with the business to identify what you should push forward depending on the specific project, right? Because there's going to be times where you're going to be like, okay, well, he has 2 different ones. We need to go with the NYU one for this. Well, he has 2 different ones. We need to go with the second one that connects to many for this specific application. So it will come down to the business rules and working with the business, but you have the right idea. Capture it, identify it, find out how to deal with it.
Okay, thank you.
Now, what did that button do? Here we go. All right, so let's go to, there we go. All right, so this is a small snippet of a data vault from not really from any specific client, but it's a mock-up based on some of our clients. And you can see how this can get pretty complicated pretty fast, but also really helpful and really important. Interestingly, so this is a chunk, this is mostly just dealing with the students and the classes they're taking. And we see that section is the core of what's happening here. And our instinct, of course, is to say, well, student is probably the core, but we see student is involved, blue subject over here. But it's section that everything is feeding from. We see teachers, we see concurrent college credits, we see courses. There's all sorts of things tied to this. And beyond being helpful for your data, this is a really helpful framework to discuss things. The language your organization uses, it's called your ontology, right? What you call a certain thing and what that means. And this goes to something Ed was talking about, where in the K-12 environment, there are so many different words for the same thing. And as a natural part of getting your data built around subjects, you're going to start defining things. A really fun example of this, I think, is this user hub down here, which is tied to the section teacher link. Now that's kind of interesting because we're saying we have users and we have sections, and the link between them is section teacher. So the full discussion behind this is that it's really hard to identify the line between who is a teacher and who isn't. And this led to a lot of interesting organizational discussions. Some people say a teacher is anyone who's accredited and teaches a student. So there's no, anyone who teaches a student is a teacher. So it's also, well, what about the people who are a secretary but teach a TA class? Or what about the academic coaches? They're teachers, even though they don't directly teach a student. So there was all this back and forth and discussion about it, and we couldn't settle on a single definition of teacher. But when we ingested this platform that associated students in their various classes, it was agreed on that if a user is in this platform, and if that user has students assigned to them in a section, then everyone can agree they account as a teacher. So as you undertake this process, not only are you organizing your data, but you're helping develop your ontology and your business rules and finding some really interesting things about your data that you may have never wanted to know, as Kasturi was saying there. But it's all really interesting. So yeah, Any questions or thoughts on this diagram? This little model take. Okay, well, that wraps up my portion of this presentation about the benefits of using a data vault approach to your educational data and how important it is to have words for things and getting all your data talking to each other. Now, the other side to that coin, of course, is once you have the data, you need to make sure that it is not going anywhere you don't intend for it to go. So I'm going to hand this off to Mike now because that is his area of passion.
Thanks, Christopher. So interestingly enough, if Roth, the questions that Kasturi was asking really are a good segue into this, because if you can see my background, I selected that background back there, which is Legos organized. If you've ever seen the alternative, if you have kids that like to play with Legos and you're walking across the floor in the dark and you find Legos, it's painful, right? And that's kind of how these legacy or operational ODS type databases operate, is just throw all your data together and hope the business can make sense out of it. And clearly Data Vault helps you not only organize your data, but put it into incremental business concepts and build it incrementally as you build it out so that someone can grab a tray and have a reasonable chance of building something valuable from that. So it allows us to react. I believe Data Vault data warehouses help us to react to the common challenges in the industry, which is that, not only is there a need for speed and building the organized set of data, cleansed set, or high quality data set that Kasturi was mentioning, but the demands for that data are constantly growing. The sources are constantly increasing. And the information requests are out of control. I don't know a data engineer that feels like they're caught up with the demand. So in order to keep up with that, you have to use automation in your tool, or you have to use automation as a tool to build your Data Vault. And Data Vault lends itself well to automation. Plus, Data Vault is lends itself to incremental development. So without a lot of backwards reverse engineering, or re-engineering, I should say, without a lot of re-engineering, you can increase your model. Now, most people on this call are data engineers or consultants, and so you also realize that at the same time we're told go, drop the clutch, pound the gas, go full speed, we're also being told stop. There's threats of breach and there's compliance. And Christopher recognized earlier that we have a way to make a positive impact in the world, but student privacy is really all of our responsibilities. So keeping this data that we've now organized and made easily accessible through our data warehouse, keeping it safe is not just a what would you call it, a regulatory concern for us. It should be near and dear to our hearts in terms of our responsibilities. So we're here to tell you that productivity and risk management can coexist, if you will. So here's an example. And we've had lots of clients ask for this, and we've implemented it in a couple healthcare scenarios, but a couple educational scenarios as well. And so if you can imagine that you have a set of data, and we just took a set of students in two different teachers' classes where they have grades in those classes, all right, at the student grade, what their grade is on that in that class. Now, you might say that teacher Mrs. Taylor has no business seeing the grades in Mr. Smith's class. So we could create a policy through InfoSecure. InfoSecure is the product that we install directly in the database. We create a policy in metadata that says Mr. Smith teaches students Dan, Bobby, and Lisa, and therefore only should see Dan, Bobby, and Lisa, or only see data that teacher Smith is responsible for, okay? So we might filter. In addition, you might also have, go ahead and move forward there, you might also have the need to obscure data. In this case, maybe de-identify that data, or anonymize is another word, or mask, or obfuscate. We use all sorts of words that kind of mean similar things but slightly different. If you want to de-identify or anonymize the data, then you can simply cover that column, and it can be done with a policy in metadata applied at query time based on who is asking. So if I'm a user that has access to student data, I might see that column. But if I'm I don't know, the janitor, and I shouldn't see student IDs, but I maybe need to see a total count of students, well, then this data might be automatically or automatically filtered at the row and column level so that I only see what's appropriate for me. Any questions about this? Before we move on to the next one, this is pretty simple. We call it cell level security because you're overlaying row and column security simultaneously in the database at query time based on who you are. And InfoSecure facilitates this with a simple layer inside the database that runs right at query time without adding overhead. In fact, often it increases query performance because we tell the optimizer what it needs to know in order to produce these result sets. Questions? Anybody have any use cases that this would be useful or valuable in? We had one of our education clients say, well, we would never give students access to our data warehouse. And I said, why not? What if you could, with confidence, give students access to your data warehouse and they could only see their data? Why wouldn't you? And we think InfoSecure is the technology that could allow that to happen. In fact, we know it is. I'll show you a little bit more about that here in a second. Next, let's talk about disaggregate information identification. This is not a term we invented. It's the idea that aggregated information, when the is sensitive or increases sensitivity as the represented population diminishes in size. Okay, so you can see in this set of data that this is summarized data based on a demographic. In this case, we just use male and female as the demographic, but it could be any several different layers. It could have race in there or whatever, right? In a demographic, as you reduce your green, you can see, next slide, you can see that one of these objects has only 11 students in its population. So that 79 grade percentage for that group is fairly low compared to the others. And you're kind of singling out the males in geometry in the 2019 first semester, right? So you could say that that data now, because of the small population size, is more sensitive than its sister data in the other rows. So we actually have an algorithm within InfoSecure, again, that runs based on policies at query time that allows us to filter out data or obfuscate data that is at a level of higher sensitivity. Or maybe that row only shows up if you have a higher sensitivity role within an organization. Does this trigger any special cases for any of you on the call? Have you run into cases like this? I know it exists in healthcare and in education, so I'm just wondering if you have any special cases like this out there.
Is it because you can identify the students and that's why you want to hide it?
Yes, essentially it's that. It's that, statisticians would say that once a student count falls below a certain number, you have the risk of being able to re-identify the students that made up that set. If you can go back one slide here, just so we can see that data again. There's 11 males in geometry and they have a 79 grade point. Well, so that means that, in general, there's some guys in that class that are failing that class. So you could use that data to get kind of personal in the in the re-identifying. Certainly, if you get down to one, then it's obvious, right? If there's one in the result set, but there's always some threshold that probably your compliance organization would help you come up with a threshold where data that falling below a certain threshold becomes more sensitive. And so we have the capability of being able to single that out and apply different security policies to data was coming from small populations than you do from the other 6 rows or 5 rows in this result set.
Yeah, I definitely ran into this in healthcare. So
right. Yep, it's all over in healthcare.
Yeah, we do
That's kind of where this came out of, but I think it's applicable in education as well. If you could think of, like, if your demographic was football players in Idaho, well, guess what? There's not a lot of minorities at my kid's high school. So if you had football players based on their race in my kid's high school, well, there'd be one that would fall into this category in geometry. So now you know his grade. Now you know he's getting a 79 and he shouldn't be playing on the football team because he's not pulling his weight, right? He's failing well, I don't know, 79 might be. But you can see how that data, that aggregate data could be used very, very inappropriately if we don't take the responsibility to make it more sensitive. So I have one more slide here, and then this is just talking about the fact that your security policies should not have to reinvent the wheel. We know that inside your data, you already have which students are in which classes for which teachers. You already know that John Jones administrates the school, CHS, Capital High School, right? So that's already evident in your data. So we have the ability to reference data that exists that creates hierarchies that we can leverage to create policies. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can leverage data that you already have. And we have what's called maps and relates capabilities inside InfoSecure that helps you use the data. In one case, one of our clients has Active Directory. In Active Directory, they have a lot of this metadata already defined. They have groups that define who reports to whom and which teachers are in which courses, and all sorts of data like that is in Active Directory. So we just reference Active Directory instead of reinventing the wheel and forcing your policy administrators to recreate those policies. We just reference Active Directory and then use InfoSecure to apply it to your row and column level data. And that is the end, I believe, of my slides. And with that, that's how you can get a hold of us. Of course, you can always go to our website and contact us there as well, info-via.com. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tim.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Want to make sure that we covered questions and the answers that you were looking at. And so did anybody else have any additional questions? Okay, well, I'm sure there's more questions than we realize and that we have time to cover, of course. So right now I'd like to transition over to Stephen. He is in our organization as Director of Sales, and want to make sure that we follow up correctly with you guys. So Stephen, you wanted to talk a little bit about results and then close our time.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I just had one thing to say about our organization. Maybe we didn't get a sense of this, but as you saw with Christopher's discussion, part of the services that we have engaged with our clients is more advisory. And so that's really our bent as a consultancy, is to give advice to help accelerate implementations of Data Vault and Data Warehouse within our education clients, and achieve some really good results with our clients like NYU, who is attending today. And the second half of it is our InfoSecure product. And InfoSecure really did, I think Mike may have mentioned this, but it grew out of the need of our clients. In these Data Vault implementations and Data Warehouse implementations, we would invariably see a real gap there in terms of the ability to share data. But also we saw kind of the inefficiencies of the ways in which clients tried to protect or share their data. Oftentimes they would be doing data polls that eventually would become stale because they didn't have any mechanism to keep those up to date. They would be doing things like writing multiple BI reports. Some of our clients have said they've got 10 variants of same reports. And then when they need to make a change to that report, they need to go and change every, one of those different reports for their different constituents, whether it's teachers or administrators or back office staff or what have you. And by using InfoSecure, as Mike demonstrated, to kind of set the policy within our tool, they can have one version of all of those reports. And depending on who is actually running the report and querying the data, it will then present the proper data to them. And so it just makes that whole process of managing the data and reporting on the data a lot more efficient as well. So anyway, I just wanted to say those are the kind of results that we've achieved with our education clients. And if you have any interest in that, whether it is the advisory side or whether it is exploring how InfoSecure might help make your organization not only more secure, but also more efficient, we're happy to have that discussion with you. So that's it, Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and Christopher's going to share your slide there at the end, some customers that we've worked with and some of the results that we've had. So there's some people that we're currently working with and some new people that we're working with. So thank you all so much for coming today. We really appreciate your time. We know you could be doing a lot of other things right now, like driving to Destin, Florida, like one of our people is. So thank you for that. And we are excited to help you in any way we can. So please contact us. You can go to the next slide there and you can see our email addresses. We'll be following up with each one of you and we'll give you 10 minutes back to your day. That's pretty cool. So, go have fun and have a wonderful afternoon and we'll be in touch.
Tim, I'd be happy to hang around for 10 minutes if anybody else does. And we can go off the record.
Sure.
Stop recording maybe in case anybody has specific questions about their environment. So let's go ahead and stop that recording.
Yeah.